I have never said that before. In all the time I have been doing this work, in all the readings I have delivered, for all the people this work has reached, I have never put what I am about to put on the line in the specific and public form of someone who is staking their credibility on what they are about to say in the "if I am wrong, I will stop" form of a claim so certain that the person making it is willing to be finished. If the claim turns out to be wrong, I have never said that before, and I am saying it now for the specific Virgo this reading found, because what I am reading in your field right now is not the kind of energy that leaves room for doubt. In the person reading it, it is the kind that arrives with certainty already in it, in the specific and unmistakable form of something that is so close and so real, and so arriving that the only honest response is to stake everything on it. In the way this reading is staking everything on the 5 days that separate right now from what is coming for you, in the specific and arriving form of what this reading is about to name. 5 days, Virgo, and everything changes. This reading has 4 layers. Stay for all 4, because the 4th layer is the one that explains why I am willing to retire if what I say does not arrive in 5 days. And that explanation is the most important thing in this entire reading for the specific Virgo it found. Virgo, my beautiful Virgo, what I am about to say is real, and it is arriving in 5 days. Welcome, and do not go anywhere. The first layer, and this one is about where you are right now, in the specific and interior form that the Virgo rarely shows anyone, including themselves, in the full and acknowledged form of what is actually present in the interior of the specific Virgo this reading found today. I feel something that I want to name very carefully, because the careful naming is what produces the specific and landing recognition that tells the Virgo reading this that this reading is for them specifically and not for the general and approximate Virgo that collective readings sometimes address without the precision that this reading has for the specific Virgo it found today. You have stopped expecting, not in the dramatic and announced form of someone who has consciously and deliberately given up expecting as a declared and visible decision that the people around them know about, in the form of someone who has said out loud that they have stopped expecting, and who is now visibly in the stopped expecting form of someone who has declared the stopping. In the quiet and gradual and almost unnoticed form of someone who woke up one ordinary day and noticed, not dramatically, but in the quiet and interior form of a noticing that happens before the analysis arrives, to assess what is being noticed, that the expecting was smaller than it was the day before, in the specific and shrinking form of something that has been reducing itself gradually in the quiet days of the waiting that preceded this moment. And then another day arrived, and the expecting was smaller still, in the continuing and gradual form of something that reduces without announcement, until the day when the noticing arrives, in the quiet and interior form that the reduction has been happening for long enough that the expecting has become something that is present only in the very quiet and very small and very guarded form of something that has been reduced to the smallest available version of itself that still qualifies as expecting, rather than not expecting, in the specific and arrived at form of someone who has waited long enough for the expecting to reduce itself to the smallest available form without fully disappearing. That smallest available form of expecting is still there. I feel it clearly in the quiet and guarded and very small form that it has taken after the gradual reduction of the waiting that preceded this moment, and that produced the stopped expecting quality that the first layer is naming as the specific interior state of the Virgo reading this right now. Spirit wants me to say this directly before the first layer closes and the second opens. The smallest available form of expecting that is still there after the reduction is the most accurate form of expecting that the Virgo has been in the full period of the waiting, because it is the form that survived everything that the waiting threw at it, in the reducing and diminishing form of a long and sometimes cruel wait that would have eliminated the larger and louder forms of expecting that were present in the earlier period of the waiting, and that survived only in the smallest and most essential form of something that could not be reduced to nothing because it was something real. And real things do not reduce to nothing. Even under the pressure of the longest and hardest wait, the smallest form is the truest form, and it is about to be confirmed in 5 days. The second layer, stay with me, Virgo, because this layer is where I tell you what is coming in 5 days in the specific and named form that the staking of the retirement on it requires of the reading that is staking, the credibility of its reader, on the accuracy of what is being said in the 5 days form of something so close and so certain that the only honest response is to name it specifically rather than in the vague and unverifiable form of something that could be claimed as arrived in any general circumstance without the specific form that makes the claiming verifiable by the specific Virgo who will know whether it arrived or not in the specific and personal form of their actual life in 5 days. What is coming in 5 days is a contact in the specific and significant form of someone reaching out in a way that is more direct than what has been available before from this specific person in the period of the waiting that produced the stopped expecting quality. That the first layer described as the current interior state of the specific Virgo reading this. The contact arrives in the form of something said or sent or communicated in the direct and personal way that the indirect and uncertain period of the waiting did not produce before the 5 days, and that the 5 days is producing now for the specific Virgo. This reading is staking everything on. The contact contains something specific that I want to name directly, because the direct naming is what makes the staking of the retirement real, rather than the vague and unverifiable that would make the staking meaningless as a claim. The contact contains an admission in the specific and direct form of someone saying something that they have been not saying for the full period of the waiting, that produced the stopped expecting quality. In the Virgo who has been waiting without the admission arriving in the direct form, that would have ended the waiting. Before now, if it had arrived before now, in the 5 days form that it is arriving in, for the specific Virgo, this reading found the admission is about you and what you mean to the person making it in the specific and feeling-based form of something that has been held in the interior and private dimension of someone who has been sitting with what they feel without saying it for longer than the not saying was comfortable, and that the 5 days is the window in which the not saying finally becomes the saying in the direct and personal and contact form that this reading is staking. The retirement on the third layer, I need you to stay with me for this one, because it is the layer that surprised me most. When the reading came through in the not prepared form of something that arrived with more than I was expecting in the field around your life today, and that made the staking of the retirement feel not only possible, but necessary as the honest form of what the certainty in the field required of the person reading it. The third layer is about why now, why 5 days specifically, why the admission is arriving in 5 days rather than in the longer period that the waiting suggested it might take before the not saying became the saying. For the specific person connected to the specific Virgo, this reading found Spirit is showing me something very specific about what changed in the field around the situation recently in the specific and particular form of something that tipped from one side to another. In the way that certain things tip when the accumulation on one side has exceeded the capacity of the other side to maintain the balance that was keeping the not saying in the not saying form rather than the saying form. That 5 days is now the window for what tipped was the Virgo's energy in the specific and significant form of the stopped expecting quality that the first layer described as the current interior state of the specific Virgo reading this. The person connected to you has been feeling your energy in the specific and sustained form of someone who is attuned to it, even from a distance. In whatever specific and particular distance exists between you and this person, in the current form of the situation between you, and they have been feeling the stopped expecting quality in the specific and arriving form of something felt before it is understood, in the body first and pre-conscious way of something that is too significant to wait for the analytical understanding that would explain what is being felt before the feeling has already arrived, in the specific and alarming form of the Virgo's expecting, having reduced to the smallest available form. They felt the smallest form, and the feeling of the smallest form is what tipped the not saying into the about to say in the 5 days window that this reading is naming as the specific and arriving form of the contact and the admission that the second layer described as what is coming for the specific Virgo. This reading is staking everything on your smallest form of expecting, produce their urgency in the specific and counterintuitive form of something that appears to be shrinking, but that is actually accelerating. The arrival of what it was expecting by shrinking to the form that the person who needed to feel the shrinking could finally feel as the specific and alarming signal that produced the urgency that is producing the 5 days and what the 5 days contains. The Virgo's smallest form of expecting was the most powerful form it ever took, because the smallest form was the one that was finally felt by the person who needed to feel it, to produce the urgency that the larger forms did not produce, in the specific and counterintuitive way of the smallest signal being the most heard. The fourth layer, the one that explains the retirement, in the specific and honest form, that the staking of everything requires of the reading that is staking it. For the specific Virgo it found today, I feel a question forming in you right now as the fourth layer arrives, and I want to name it before it speaks. In the undermining form that unaddressed questions sometimes take when they are not met first by the reading that can feel them forming. In the energy of the person reading, the question is not whether I am right, though that question is also there. In the background of the Virgo mind, that applies its analytical process, even to the things it most wants to believe, before allowing the belief, in the full and unanalyzed form that the trusting would require. The deeper question is this: what do I do with the 5 days in the specific and interior form of someone who has just been told that something is arriving in 5 days and who does not know whether to let the expecting return to a larger form than the smallest? It is currently reduced to before the 5 days and what they contain have confirmed the returning as warranted. In the specific and arrived form of what 5 days contains, for the specific Virgo, this reading is staking everything on. I want to answer that question directly and specifically in the most honest form available, because it deserves the direct and honest answer rather than the gentle deflection into something more comfortable but less useful. For the specific Virgo who has 5 days and does not know how to be in them after this reading has named what they contain, live the 5 days normally in the specific and particular form of someone who is simply in their life rather than in the waiting form of someone who has been told something is arriving and who is now orienting everything toward the arriving in the anticipating and forward-looking form that would make the 5 days the most uncomfortable 5 days rather than the most ordinary and lived 5 days that they can be for the specific Virgo who has been told what they contain. Live them normally, not because what is arriving is not significant, but because the normal living is what allows the arriving to find the Virgo in the unguarded and fully in the moment form that the most significant arrivals always find people in rather than the anticipating and forward-looking form. That the significant arrival has to interrupt to reach the person who was anticipating it, rather than simply living in the ordinary and available form of someone who is present in their actual life. When the arrival arrives, I want to give you something before this closes. In the permission form that the stopped expecting Virgo specifically needs before the 5 days and what they contain, permission to let the expecting return to a slightly larger form than the smallest it has been reduced to, not the full and loud form of the beginning of the waiting, when the expecting was at its largest and most unguarded before the reduction began, in the quiet and gradual form that the waiting produced over the period of its continuing, a slightly larger form than the smallest in the specific and proportionate form of something that has been told by a reading staking everything on 5 days. That the 5 days contain what the stopped expecting Virgo has been in the smallest form of expecting for, in the quiet and guarded and reduced form that the waiting produced. The smallest form was real, and the slightly larger form is now warranted by the reading that staked the retirement on what 5 days contains. For the specific Virgo, it found, you are protected and guided, and the 5 days are already counting. For the specific and beautiful Virgo, whose smallest form of expecting was the most powerful form it ever took, because it was the one that was finally felt by the person who needed to feel it, to produce the urgency that is now producing the 5 days and what the 5 days contain for the specific Virgo. This reading found today and staked everything on. Take gentle care of yourself, my beautiful Virgo. I am not retiring because what I said is coming, and you already feel it. In the smallest form of expecting, that survived everything, the wading through at it, and that is now finally about to be confirmed in 5 days.